generally accepted now that social media has a really important role to play in any overall marketing mix for a law firm. However, it's so important that before any of this activity takes place, the firm asks one really crucial question. And that question is, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? Now that sounds really obvious, but I promise you 9 times out of 10, that question and all the accompanying potential answers are bypassed and people just leap straight into the activity without any sense of what they're trying to get out of it or how they're going to measure that performance. So I just want to run through what I believe to be the 3 main categories of benefit of engaging in this activity and suggest some potential KPIs that might correspond to each. So first of all, we have the brand benefits, which are certainly I would suggest that the kind of least quantifiable, but arguably the most important. Now, what I mean by the brand benefits is increasingly customers and also employees of law firms are demanding that the firm really opens itself up and shows a more human side, shows a more transparent side, really communicates what it stands for from a cultural perspective, what are its values, etc. And I would suggest that there are no more effective channels through which to achieve those aims than social media. Now, in terms of how you measure the success of it, as I say, it can be quite qualitative. It can be really just asking people for comments, what's their feedback on your presence and the kind of content you're putting out there, etc. But of course, you can also measure things like reach and engagement. Now, secondly, we have the direct lead generation element of social media. Now, this is very dependent on the firm's target audience. For some firms, this is going to be much more applicable than for others. But ultimately, if your audience is active on social media, and if you're able to capture their data, kind of register their interests as a means of filling your sales and marketing pipeline, and you're able to do it in a way where the cost per acquisition for that data is less than the lifetime profit value of that customer, taking into account conversion rates, then why wouldn't you do it? And social media can be a really fantastic, scalable way of ramping up your lead generation. So that's the second category of benefit, and of course very easy to quantify. You can see exactly how much it costs, exactly how many leads you've generated, and then you can look back and see the impact that's had on your sales pipeline. The third category of benefit, and the one that I think people probably consider the least, is the impact of social media on your other digital channels, in particular those that you actually own. Now, what I mean by this is one of the challenges with social media is you don't actually own those as platforms. So you don't own your Facebook page, for example, and if Mark Zuckerberg gets in trouble for contravening some GDPR regulation and they restrict the advertising options available via Facebook and even Instagram, there's nothing you can do about that. Likewise, if you have an intern who comes in and writes something silly on Twitter and your profile gets blocked, you can't do anything about that. Or maybe there's an admin error and someone accidentally deletes your LinkedIn profile. Again, you can't do anything about that. Or more likely, just on all of these channels, the cost of advertising just gets higher and higher and higher until eventually you get to a point where it's no longer a kind of a viable route to market, and all of that activity, all of that investment has kind of been for nothing in the long term. So it's really important that we maintain a degree of kind of, not cynicism, but we're always challenging the value of social media in that respect. Whereas if we compare it to other channels, in particular your website and your email list, now these are channels that you own, they are yours, they are your assets to build and to nurture. And therefore, the more that we can drive our social activity back to these channels, in particular the email list, the greater the value we're ultimately going to be taking from those social media platforms. So as I said at the beginning, there's no question that social media is hugely important now within the legal sector. But it's just so important that before you dive into that activity, just ask those questions. What is it we're trying to achieve, and how are we going to measure the performance?